Supplier credits are a normal transaction that your business is going to need to process on a regular basis. Hopefully not every day, but the reality is that mistakes are made. Suppliers may send you the wrong products, they may send you too few, too many products, they may charge you the wrong price. There are a multitude of reasons why you may need to claim a credit back from your supplier. In Visage, this is an easy process. Navigationally, we'd go to Purchase Orders, Transactions, the Supplier Credit menu, and from there we'd pick Supplier Credit Entry. If we look at the scenario where we've been overcharged for an item, first of all, the first piece of information we need to do is nominate which supplier we're claiming the credit for. And of course, because I see my little magnifying search field up here, I know that I can use a search screen, which I can access a number of ways, hitting that button, using a right-click context menu, or even using a function key. Put something in about the supplier's name in this case, click my search, and select the supplier. But if you know the code, of course, you can key it directly in. As soon as you enter the supplier number in, a number of fields get filled in for you automatically. If we start from the bottom, we can see that we normally interact with this supplier via email to this email address. This was set up on his supplier master file. We also have a fax number on file, and that's the person that we normally send the fax to. The system has also assumed that the credit we're raising is for today, because obviously if you're doing your work on a regular basis, you've done the receipt in the morning, immediately you've picked up on this price adjustment that needs to be done because they've overcharged you for the item. So normally I'd expect that you'd be raising the credit on the same day that you're receiving the goods. There may be reasons why that isn't the case, but for my example, let's say that that's the scenario. I'm going to leave my credit reference field blank, even though it's a mandatory field. I know that because of the red highlight there. And the reason I'm leaving it blank is because my system is set up to automatically allocate the credit reference numbers, because that's what I've opted for in my parameters. You may have that turned off, in which case you could supply your own credit numbers, or if you were looking up an existing credit that you'd entered previously, you could just key the details in here and call that credit back up on screen. If we move down to the next field of importance here, it's the supplier's invoice number. Now, we don't actually validate this invoice number, it's effectively a free text field, and that's because there may be a number of invoices that are affected, so you can key in all of those invoice numbers in the one place. For our example, where we've been overcharged, I'm not going to enter an order number in, nor am I going to tick this box to update the receipt quantity. And of course, the withhold here is for additional tax, which was set up on the supplier's master file as not ticked, so I'm not going to worry about that either. Now, I'm not sure how much my credit total is going to be worth. If I had worked it out beforehand, I would actually key that in here because it will become a cross-check, as you'll see. But I'll just go straight to my product screen. And the product that I was overcharged on is this particular RF product. And you can put the supplier's code in or your code, and once more the system will work out the appropriate things for you. You also get to nominate a reason for why you are claiming the credit. Now, these reasons you maintain yourself. So it's a list of codes that you would set up. Each of these codes will have a description, a general ledger account associated with them, and I'd also suggest that you do wish to maintain a history of supplier credits and the reasons why you're claiming credits, simply so that you can come back and analyse your purchases later on. Now, is one supplier not using sufficient packing material? Are they always overcharging you? These can be useful when you enter into negotiations with the supplier, because if they're not performing from a delivery point of view, that can impact your entire supply chain, which in turn will reflect badly upon you. So we've nominated our reason. Next, how many items we're claiming a credit for. In my scenario, I've had 2 invoices arrive, and both of them were for 12 items, and I was overcharged 50 cents. So the total quantity of items that I'm claiming my credit for is going to be 24. The system will assume that I want to return all 24 items to the supplier on the basis that it was an oversupply or something similar. But in this case, I don't actually want to return any items to the supplier. I've got the right number of goods, so I'm returning 0. Now the effect of this, therefore, is going to be that my stock levels will remain exactly the same. However, if we have a look at the next fields, the unit cost field has defaulted to the $37 they normally cost me. But through a negotiation that I wasn't aware of and someone hadn't entered up as a supplier special, I've purchased the items at the wrong price, but they really should have been $36.50. But the claim that I'm raising at the moment is actually for 50 cents an item, because I was overcharged for 50 cents for each of them. So that's actually the amount I enter in as the unit cost. The system will do the extension for me. 24.50 cents is $12 plus GST. That's the total of my credit. And if that's all I wanted to put on this particular credit claim, I can hit save at this point in time. The system will complain because it's checking to make sure that the amount of credit that I've entered up here on my second screen, and potentially it could be that I wanted to reclaim freight, so I could enter general ledger accounts and amounts and so forth on the GL distribution screen, but in this case there's no freight to contend with and I'm not going to claim any freight charge back on my credit claim. But on this front header, you may recall I mentioned that normally if you'd worked this out in advance you would have entered the credit total. In my case I'm cheating. I can see that the total calculated out was $13.20, and that's actually what I'll just manually enter in on this screen. Now if I hit my save button, keep your eye on two fields, the credit reference here and also the voucher number field, because when I hit save the system will allocate both of those numbers. The credit reference is simply a number that identifies this credit, and interestingly that credit reference number is unique within a supplier. So if you wanted to, you could have a different counter for each supplier, and the number will tell you how many credits you've had out to that supplier. And also the voucher number, you'll recall that's the identification in the creditors or accounts payable system to identify uniquely a transaction. Also, because this credit claim or credit entry has been saved now, I can print a hard copy of my credit claim if I wanted to. I could email it, or I could fax it directly to my supplier just with a single button press. And in my case I want to email it, but I also want to make sure that I'm aware that the supplier has actually read my email. So I'm just going to click my read receipt button, click the email. I've got to save it because I clicked that button and hadn't saved it, so I'll save it. Now that I've got my read receipt there, click the email, and the system will now go and email that credit claim for me to the supplier, and when the supplier actually opens up their email and physically reads it, hopefully I'll get a read receipt back. That's it. That's all that's required to enter a supplier credit for an overcharge. Now let's look at a scenario slightly different, where we actually have to send some items back to a supplier because they're faulty, or we may not be actually sending them back. It could be that they actually arrived broken, but the end result for either of those is the same. So once more, it may be the same supplier. I'll leave my reference blank again. I would put a supplier's invoice number in, and this time let's assume that the goods actually arrived and they were faulty or broken. I am actually going to enter in my order number, which I would remember is 14 or 1524, and by ticking this box the system will update my original purchase order for the quantity of items that we're sending back. So if I'd ordered 12 items, which I did on this particular purchase order, and I'm now sending back 10, or actually let's say we're only sending back 2, the system will record the fact that although we originally received 10, or we received 12, sorry, we're sending back 2, so it will think that there's been a total of 10 received and there are 2 outstanding still. Now In this case, I may have calculated my total, but once more I'm going to cheat. I'm just going to go straight to my product screen. I'm going to say that that particular product, the reason I am sending these back is because they're faulty. I'm actually seeking a credit for 2 of them, the return quantity, and well, that unit cost, I'll actually try my luck and see if I can get a credit for more than what I actually paid, bearing in mind I just went through the scenario of getting a 50-cent discount off those. And once more, if there were multiple products, I could enter multiple lines in here. Each of the lines could have a separate reason as to why they're going back. So on the one credit, I might have had these first lot of products which I'm actually sending back for a refund. I could also have 2 of these which I'm not returning, and they were an overcharge by $1, and I would get my reason here to correspond to that, and so forth. So I can build up this credit claim, and this time I might actually think I've got a case to claim back some freight, so I could go and find a freight account in here for my general ledger. That one is as good as any, and I can say that I want to claim that back from my Newcastle entity, and it's going to be a GST included amount that I'll enter up, and the amount that I want to claim back is $10, because I'm putting these in a bag or something similar, and I don't want to necessarily wear the cost of that. I'd much rather my supplier wear that cost, and so forth. Now, once more, I'm going to go back to my front screen and plug my total in. As I said, you may have worked this out in advance, but I do know that unless the credit total that I enter here is the same as the total that I've entered, the system won't let me save. But of course here it will let me save. The numbers are allocated both in terms of a credit reference and a voucher, and once more I can print or email or fax these, and once more I might email that off. Now that's producing the paperwork and sending the paperwork to the supplier, and it's important to be aware of the fact that when we actually do the update, when we post this transaction or these transactions, that credit's going to be recognised straight away. Now, as in other processes where we've had an edit list and post button within the process itself, if you have a transaction up on the screen and if you click, say, edit list or post, then the edit list, because that's what I've called at the moment, will just list that one singular transaction. If you don't have any transactions up on the screen, if it's blank effectively, and if you click the edit list button, then what you'll get is the ability to only do transactions from a single individual or for everyone. At the moment, I'm the only person that's put transactions out there, and we'll get a slightly larger edit list this time that will actually have the 2 credit claims that we've put out, and we might want to post and update those. So we can just hit the post button, click OK, and at this stage the creditor system is being updated, the inventory system is being downdated, there are cost adjustments taking place to the cost price of those items that I was overcharged for, and those edit list and posts, by the way, you can also do from this menu. They have exactly the same impact. But as I said, we've now sent the paperwork off to our supplier, and if we were to go and have a look at our supplier now, if I get the right process name in here, if we have a look here, we'll have a look at his current transactions, and up the top we have our 2 credits sitting there. So we've actually taken these credits up straight away. There's been no mucking about associated with these. The supplier, however, hasn't actually acknowledged them at this point in time. We may or may not get it, and that could lead to problems in terms of reconciliation and so forth later on. So I would suggest, and it is just a suggestion, but to make life easier, I would think that every time you're doing a credit claim where the supplier hasn't been pre-notified or hasn't sent out his paperwork, if it was me, I'd go into accounts payable, transactions, disputed transactions, and yeah, you may want to poke your tongue out like that. I'd call up my RF supplier At the moment, there are no disputed transactions out here. My reference number, it's my choice here. I could enter in a voucher number, an invoice number, an order number. It really has no great significance. The system isn't validating it anywhere. But in my case, I'm going to just, key the right number in and say, well, this relates to that invoice or the credit 272 that I had. For notation purposes, I'll just record the fact that I've got a disputed transaction for a credit which was dated today. It was for $13.20, and in terms of my reference, I'll put in credit sent via email, and you could put some additional notes and so forth in at this point in time, but I'm just going to save that at that point, and now that's recorded against the supplier. Now the reason I would do that is because at some point in time in the future we've sent effectively a request for credit, and we're taking that money off the guy's account or off the supplier's account immediately. Next payment run, that's probably going to be taken up, and we're effectively going to short pay him, and we may do that before the supplier has actually issued a credit. Now the process I would suggest you consider putting in place is always raise one of these disputed transactions if you expect or anticipate the supplier is going to be sending you their own paperwork for this credit. And then when you do receive credits in the mail, it's rare and indeed impossible potentially if you follow the procedure of raising credits through the system. The supplier isn't just going to raise a credit out of the blue, out of the goodness of his heart. There must have been a reason for it, and the reason was where we sent that request for credit through, which we've taken up. When you get the credit from the supplier, I would suggest that you then simply come into your disputed transactions area, call the disputed transaction up on screen, identify it, you may have a number of them here, and physically delete it. Get rid of it, because it's now no longer a disputed transaction. We have a piece of paper from the supplier that is recognising their credit. What you may do to keep things in sync, so to speak, is you might go and adjust the voucher that the credit actually related to. We'll just do this the long way here. We'll go and search. We will sort those by transaction date, and if it was that voucher there, the supplier may actually have given us these not on his invoice or credit reference 272, so I'm going to adjust this to be the credit reference that he actually sent through. And in terms of a note log, I would typically come in here and record an electronic image of the credit that actually came through. May have been via an email, it may have been that I have to scan it or something similar, but just so I have a record of what that was, and then simply save the voucher. And now that voucher, if we do that accounts payable inquiry again for that supplier, rather than having a transaction reference number of 272, it will have the supplier's actual credit reference there. And in terms of my note log, I'd be able to call up and see the details of the actual credit that the supplier raised. Now that subtle change, what it means is you aren't waiting for the supplier to issue you with a piece of paper, you're claiming the credit straight away, and the disputed transactions are there simply to track those credits which you've claimed, which as yet the supplier hasn't issued you the paperwork or hasn't recognised. And obviously you can use the disputed transactions for any other disputes. You may get a statement that comes in that has an invoice on there that you have no idea what it is. You can record those as disputed transactions, as we've looked at in the past. But in terms of processing credits through the Visage system, once more, we did that through purchases, transactions, and the supplier credit menu. It's simple, it's easy, it's very efficient, and it's something that you should do straight away. As soon as you're aware of the problem, take care of it. That's credits in Visage. Hopefully you won't have to raise too many, but thanks for watching.